Now I would like to request Dr. Devanati Gupta to kindly take the charge of the slide and start the first keynote session, online session with Professor Dr. Lucas from Royal College of Gujarat.
And to moderate the keynote session, I have with me my very distinguished colleague, Dr. Arlena Chanda. She is a student professor in English at Visha Munda College, University of Gour. She has completed her PhD on children's literature from training and also is a very pre-doctoral fellow. And she has written a number of books and won the Church's awards, including How I Became a Writer and Women of India, which was published in 2019. So I would request Organisers is here, so you can take on the session from here.
Good morning, everybody. I welcome you all to the opening keynote address International Conference on Disaster and its Afterlife. And if you see immense pleasure to welcome and our keynote speaker for today, Professor Gour. Professor Gour is an anthropology professor and the director of research and development at Royal College of Gujarat. He holds an MPhil in anthropology from the University and a PhD in anthropology from English Law. Prior to joining Royal College in 2015, he taught at Second Central University in Canada and was a visiting faculty at Jalpaiguri University of Dhupguri under the excellence initiative of the Journal of Research Foundation. He currently holds the lead of the Himalaya Environmental Humanities of the University of Professor Gour is the author of 11 books, including Consultancy, Molecular Politics in Northeast India, about the studies storing multiple kinds of Himalayas, Andes, and Arctic, and Himalayan kinds and multi-species encounters. His current research focuses on the affective, spiritual, experiential, textual, and relational dimensions of multi-species ethics and justice, and human and non-human migration. Today, we will be talking about biology as multi-species migration. But before I hand over to Professor Gour, just a couple of statements. This is a we have around 10 minutes at the end for question and answers. Also, it's been live stream. Our agriculture. So I will request all of you to please put your phones on silent so that we minimize the audio disruptions in this round. So with that, without any further ado, I would like to call upon Professor Gour's services.
Good morning, everyone. Am I audible?
Sir, can you hear us?
Yes.
So we can start your talk. So if you can kindly put your background so that all our participants
আপনি জয়েন করে বলুন না জয়েন করে বলুন শুরু করুন I don't know whether I'm audible. I can hear a lot of voices. আপনি জয়েন করে আছেন না এটা এটা খুলে দেন শুনতে পাচ্ছেন না বলছে এখান থেকে কথা বলো খোলা আছে
So we have joined and we have introduced you. So can you, yeah. Can, so we can't watch you over here. So, can you put your camera on?
My camera is on.
Yeah. So can you hear us?
Yes. I can hear you at the moment. My camera is also on. I can see myself.
Okay. So let us fix this one.
All right.
Okay.
Ma'am, it is visible to us as we have joined in online. We can see our speaker.
So there is a small technical glitch. In 2 minutes, it will be solved. So
All right.
you can start your talk, sir. We
All right.
we
Can you
can't see you, but we can hear you, sir.
All right. Can you confirm that I'm audible?
Sorry, sir, did you ask about the time?
No. Can you confirm that I'm audible?
Yeah. So you can start now, sir. Can you hear us?
Yes, but can you hear me?
Sorry, we can't understand you.
Can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yeah. We
Yeah,
can hear
yeah,
you.
yeah.
We can hear you. We just can't see you on the screen, but we can hear you.
All right.
We're trying
Then
to fix the screen issue.
All right. I shall make a start. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers and Dhupguri College for inviting me to deliver this keynote this morning. This conference asked a number of important questions. It asked, does it call for new registers to study disaster, an afterlife of disaster, where scenes of adaptation, readjustment, reconciliation takes precedence? Do we need to unearth and narrate novel stories of strivings that often go unnoticed, unacknowledged, and therefore backgrounded? What can these tales from the background reveal? What role does the space of non-human play in these narratives? These are all very important questions raised by the organizers. The organizers also ask for a multidisciplinary approach. I would like to propose to add that a multi-species or more than human and inter-epistemological approach might usefully be added to the conference objectives. In this lecture, I will make 4 propositions to this conference about how we might acquire a more critical, capacious, caring, and curious understanding of climate change and natural disasters in the larger Himalayan region. My first proposal is that we add temporal depth to our thinking, research, and writing on climate change and disasters. To accurately assess the climate changes in the Himalayas, we need to carefully scrutinize our beliefs about the past. In public discussions about climate change, much like the debates on development that once overshadowed conversations about the condition and future of the world before climate change became the focal point, there is often a notable absence of historical perspective. It seems as though the world has either remained essentially stable or has been gradually evolving until now, and we are entering a bizarre new era of unparalleled and rapid change. Whereas development used to promise widespread prosperity, climate change now threatens global disaster. Well, today, the Himalayas may strike a pose of stability and permanence from a human perspective. A deep time geological diary would show Himalayan landscapes continuously changing and shifting, with valleys moving, glaciers and rivers migrating, some peaks disappearing, and other peaks emerging. Well, the Himalayas are today at the forefront of climate change from the vantage of deep time, which summons the indigenous pre-human Earth and the extensive timescales of geological formation. Himalayan mountains emerge as weather and climate makers. Himalayan mountains, as integral to the epic of Earth architecture and agency, rose as the result of the Great Himalayan Uplift, which began some 50 million years ago, due to the collision of the Indian and Eurasian tectonic plates. This tectonic collision is often painted as a violent and destructive event, characterized by the shattering of a subduction zone. However, this so-termed destruction also released creative, generative, and life-sustaining conditions and energies. Crucially, this Earth epic of mountain making was concurrently a process of climate making, inducing both regional and planetary cooling effects. This transformation involved the reconstitution of hydrological cycles, leading to the emergence of new meteorological and ecological conditions, with the Himalayas also acting as the co-creators of glaciers, snowscapes, permafrost, lakes, rivers, and subterranean reservoirs. In their geological formation, Himalayan mountains both co-created and became central to the Cenozoic era, with Cenozoic meaning recent life or new life, enabled by changing Earth and climatic conditions. So from the window of deep time, it was the Indo-Eurasian tectonic conversation, a term arguably more apt than collusion, that laid the geo-eco-climatic foundation of the Himalayas and its diverse forms of life, both human and not, biotic and abiotic. As a case in point, Himalayan mountains are also monsoon makers, with the geological elevation interacting with moisture-rich air transported by winds from the Bay of Bengal and Indian Ocean beyond. As this air meets the mountains, it rises, condenses, and releases their moisture as precipitation. Consequently, the Himalayan mountains co-create the Indian monsoon, which enabled and sustained Indian civilizations for a very, very long time. Through rivers and erosion, Himalayan mountains also become movers of sand, sediment, and silt that co-created and continue to nourish floodplain ecologies, including the large Bengal Delta, which is ultimately an Himalayan creation. The historian Winel van Schendel writes, and I quote him, "Bangladesh is the Himalayas flattened out," unquote, highlighting that the delta was built by particles of soil transported and deposited there by Himalayan rivers. If we understand the natural disaster in terms of a massive displacement of water and soil, in terms of landslides or floods, for instance, then from a deep time perspective, it was a gradual natural disaster that created life in the Bengal Delta. A disaster once many millions of humans and many more ordinary humans today depend on. But of course, something has changed in recent times. My second proposal is that we think of the contemporary Himalayas as the new Himalayas, a term I borrow from my colleague and friend Dens Meyer-Yu. The new Himalayas are the anthropogenically, that means human-induced, impacted, fragmented, impounded, degraded, and geoengineered Himalayas, which are the Himalayas of the 21st century, the contemporary Himalayas, that are affected by and affecting local, regional, and planetary climate change. Water is what stands out in the new Himalayas, especially water in the form of transboundary rivers and their riparian environments, transformed by dams and embankments. International contentions over the territoriality and hydraulic potentials of the transboundary rivers contribute more anthropogenic pressures to the mountainous environments and communities of life in the Himalayan region. The newness also shows in the shape-shifting of water from solid to liquid, and in water's migration, for instance, in the drying and overflowing of lakes, so that from a Himalayan human perspective, water is in all the wrong places. The floods and glacial lake outbursts some of you will, I believe, be talking about in this conference can be usefully thought of as water out of place. This brings me, and I just assume that I'm still audible, this brings me to the third proposal, namely to think of Himalayan climate change and natural disasters as a process of multi-species migration. Himalayan climate change is inherently a multi-species affair. It does not just impact humans, but also other than humans. In its terrestrial effects, it variously fractures, fragments, and reorders the situated entanglements of humans with plants, animals, water, soil, rock, and other non-human beings, whose meaningful lives are thoroughly, if unevenly, impacted by climate change. While migration and patterns and networks of mobility have long been at the heart of various Himalayan lifeways, more recent anthropogenic impacts, including climate change and related ecological crises, have become a novel cause of migration. This climate migration results from, variously, acute natural disasters, slow onset situations that affect the livability of places, changing weather patterns and shifting hydrological cycles, state-planned relocation, or is resorted to by vulnerable households as a form of climate adaptation. This body of knowledge around climate migration is often fixed on human actors and their differentiated agency, and revolves centrally around themes of human vulnerability, resilience, interventions, and adaptation. My proposition to this conference is that we need to complement this knowledge field by also integrating non-human climate-induced migration, and by developing conjoint narratives of human, non-human migration that are cognizant of the enduring intimacies of humans, plants, animals, waters, and other non-human entities. In the unfolding Anthropocene, matter is increasingly on the move, with crops and plants, tree and snow lines, animals, water, soil, and silt variously migrating, broadly conceived here as including movement, scattering, shape-shifting, disappearing, in response to climate change and violence. These forms of non-human climate-induced migration have been insufficiently explored, yet are expected to importantly co-shape human migration patterns in the contemporary Himalayas. In this context, it will be generative to think of climate change in its terrestrial, that means Earth-gravitated, lived and lively dimensions as multi-species migration, as a process in which humans and other matter are increasingly on the move, resulting in the unmaking and remaking of shared worlds. To put it in the language of this conference, what happens when we think of natural disasters, both slow onset and sudden and explosive, and the forms of displacement and resettlement they come with, as a process of involving humans and other than humans, and of course the entanglements between them, as a process indeed of multi-species migration. My fourth and final proposal is that we broaden our field of ontological, epistemological, and ethical engagement in understanding Himalayan climate change and natural disasters, and in the process, make our knowledge more inclusive and more democratic. There is now a steady production of scientific, technical knowledge on Himalayan climate change. The prevailing conviction that climate change is undergoing change is indeed supported by a wealth of scientific data, which mostly outlines recent occurrences. In a place like Bhutan, where I'm based, people's memories of weather and climate change during their own life cycle, coupled with what they were told by their parents and grandparents, already travels a much longer time span than available climate data. And I find this quite interesting. It means that local knowledge about climate change in a place like Bhutan has a much longer time depth compared to scientific data on climate change in Bhutan. Social scientific and humanities research on Himalayan climate change is of much more recent origins. This scholarship is now beginning to offer situated, indigenous, and lively accounts which reveal that climate change is always also part of a cultural process, is experienced in specific places, and is lived and adapted to with others, most of whom are not humans. These bodies of scholarship, the scientific and the social, only seldom interact. Indeed, current knowledge making on Himalayan climate change is impeded by a marked decoupling of scientific knowledge of climate change and lived and lively experiences of climate change. What is urgently required, and this is a proposal to this conference, is to connect technical scientific insight with human experience. This approach should ground itself in the recognition that humans are also geological and ecological beings and are embedded in more than human geographies and histories that shape and in the Anthropocene reshape our relationships with physical landscapes, waters, animals, plants, and other beings. What conferences like the one you're organizing here might achieve is that they bring together scholars from different disciplinary backgrounds, but connected by a drive for genuine interdisciplinary attentiveness and curiosity that will foster the complementarity, convergence, translatability, and mutuality between the climate sciences, other sciences, the humanities, policymakers, and the public. This is also a call for what we might describe as inter-epistemological learning that affirms that there are multiple ways of knowing climate change and natural disasters, and that these multiple ways of knowing should interact and complement one another. In fact, it's often very hard to isolate the effects of climate in local and regional ecological dynamism. Under current conditions, it remains often a question of interpretation. Not only scholars debate the primary movers of ecosystem dynamism, but so, of course, do the humans who live locally, who are part of these local ecosystems. Their interpretation may vary widely from scholarly views. Bringing scholarly and local interpretations into dialogue with each other is crucially important to clarify the meaning of climate change. This involves more than an interdisciplinary conversation among people trained in the natural sciences, environmental humanities, and social sciences. It requires us all to engage in a close and sustained dialogue with local communities, including their ritual and religious specialists. I will illustrate and end my talk with a couple of ethnographic vignettes from Bhutan to illustrate these. My ethnography concerns highland lakes, including their drying out and overflowing, both of which are natural disasters in Bhutan. Water lies at the very heart of Himalayan history. The Himalayas emerged out of water in the form of the ancient Tetsis Sea. As such, the Himalayan mountain making was also, and significantly, an oceanic history. Common ecological knowledge tells us that annually around 86 million cubic meters of water are released from and through the Himalayas. This water co-creates the multi-species habitability of places, landscapes and ecosystems in and also well beyond the Himalayan ecobiome itself. In their life-giving affordances, waters also shape humans' affective, cultural, and spiritual relations with their often watery surroundings, in the sense that for many Himalayan communities, water is not only an eco-materiality, but doubles as also a cosmo-materiality that has sacred, sentient attributes. For most Himalayan communities, certainly in Bhutan but also elsewhere, water indeed is never just water, in the sense of H2O, but it is also more than water, imbued with agency, communicative powers, perhaps even a form of consciousness, of sentience, and is therefore conscious of human actions and inactions. As a case in point, in various Himalayan settings, including in Sikkim, water also constitutes a central thread running through the origin and creation stories of local communities, including stories of epic deluges and of lakes drying up to form fertile valleys. When somewhere in Bhutan you ask anyone how many lakes are there in this area, the answer you receive is quite likely to be 108. In various parts of the highlands, I time and again received this response when I inquired about the lakes there. Now, the number of 108 is not a random number. It symbolizes Gour, which is the Tibetan Buddhist canon that is loosely defined as consisting of 108 volumes of sacred text. What the association between the number 108 and lakes introduces us to is a set of human, lake, spiritual, and affective emotional relations that are mediated through the local enactments and visions of lakes as agental and sentient, with water gravitated deities, and with ecologically grounded humans bonding with other than human beings. In Bhutan, highland lakes are habitually named and personified. They manifest as bodies of spiritual instruction and enchantment. They are revealed as active actors in shared more than human worlds, and are therefore also more than water, or indeed more than lakes. Yak herders in Bhutan interact socially, spiritually, and ritually with lake bodies, whom, not which, they envision and enact as inhabited by the numinous Tsoman. Tsoman in Bhutan is a spirit being that is often loosely translated as a mermaid. In cosmological terms, Tsoman are part of a Bon Buddhist heritage. A herder named Dorji provides an insight into the nature of this human-Tsoman relationship, and I quote him here. He says, "There are palaces under the lakes where Tsoman live, and there are reasons why the lakes exist in particular places. Each lake in our highlands has its own story and reason to be there. If the lake dries up or overflows, both of which again are natural disasters, it is because the Tsoman is offended. If we herders treat the lake with reverence and do our rituals properly, then the Tsoman will be pleased and give us nodrup. Nodrup means blessings." Yak herders in Bhutan affirm and relate to Tsoman as the owners and manifestations of water bodies and their flows, and understand that these beings have their own form of intrinsic agencies in their relations with humans. In their bodily form, Tsomen are encountered, visualized, and realized by Bhutanese as part female and part reptilian. These Tsomen often appear in visions and dreams. They leave signs and symbols in waters, and they are sometimes sighted by herders. These beings are part of a cosmos that is intently interested in human affairs, and wherein the health and wealth of the community depend on understanding what Tsomen, alongside other spirit beings, require of them. Pre- and proscriptions in the form of taboos, rules, and offerings differ from one deity to another, but generally entail landscape and species preservation and the limiting of anthropogenic activities. In terms of Highland lakes specifically, herders know that these are the embodiment or abode of Tsomen, are also subjects with life histories and other than human modes of agency, perception, communication, and temporality. These Tsomen are contextually life-sustaining and wealth-bestowing, but also disaster and death dispensing beings. Jigme is a yak herder who co-dwells and co-migrates with his yaks in the Bhutan highlands. 3 of the animals that he owns are particularly precious to him because they belong to the Tsoyak, that means the lake owner's lineage. Their appearance set them apart from the other yaks. They have milky eyes, comparatively large bodies, and thick, hard, and sharp fur, like needles, as Jigme puts it. Their appa, or father, or zuel, meaning male yak, live with or in the lake, with the deity, who in this case and generally is indeed a mermaid. To bestow noodroep or blessings on Jigme, the Tsomen, the mermaid, sent a male yak out of the Tso, out of the lake, to mate with the herder's land yaks. The male yak then retreated back into the lake. The progeny that resulted from this more than yak encounter stand stout and proud, reflecting their superiority over the other members of the herd. They provide both great and spiritual value to Jigme, who is prohibited from killing or selling them as they are lake blessings. Jigme indeed considers himself blessed. He vividly recalls an incident that occurred some years ago. Sitting near the lake that is close to his pasture, he saw a white dunkar, which is a conch shell, symbolizing the reverberating sound of the Buddha Dharma, spinning around the water. Recognizing the dunkar as one of the Tasitake, the 8 auspicious symbols of Buddhism, he immediately interpreted it as a message from the Tsomen, a message from the mermaid, signaling her favor. Ever since that day, he has conscientiously interacted with the lake by offering milk and incense to the Tsomen whenever he passes by. In addition, he has ensured that he and his relatives do not introduce any drip. Drip is a key force in Bon and Tibetan Buddhism and refers to pollution that takes on physical, social, and cognitive forms. So he is trying to prevent the spreading of any drip close to the lake. For instance, by talking loudly, defecating, burning meat or chilies, the smell of which the Tsomen is known to dislike, or thinking impure thoughts. Highland herders in Bhutan regularly mention drip when discussing lakes, especially in response to experienced anthropogenic alterations in human-like lake relations. However, and in contrast to these reports of benevolence, herders are also wary of aggressive, aggrieved Tsomen, who might deprive them of wealth and health. Such behavior is sometimes discussed in terms of Jigdra. Jigdra is a Dzongkha term that translates as fear, horror, terror, fright, nightmare, and awesome power. This hierarchical, contextually disdainful disposition, which is common to both humans and deities, is cast down from a position of social superiority. For instance, humans exhibit jigtra when explicitly expressing their superior status or seniority over subordinates. And Atsoman does the same when displaying displeasure at human presence by repeatedly causing the lake to churn, creating sudden waves, or summoning a thick fog. Jigtra can also be violent or even fatal, as the Herner Sonam explained, and I quote him. The area around the lake suddenly becomes so foggy that people lose their sense of direction. Then the Tsoman lures them into the water. Only when the person has drowned will the lake leave the body at its banks. Unquote. Alternatively, a Tsoman lake might chase humans by sending water beyond our banks. This is what we usually call flooding. And I hope the audience here sees that what we call flooding from a scientific, technical perspective is experienced and explained by Highland herders as a more than human process that involves the agency and will of deities. Herders generally read a sudden change in weather or unfavorable weather, such as hailstones or destructive winds or drought, as the explicit extra-linguistic communication of an aggrieved mermaid. For instance, when drip has been caused at its shores, when rituals are not performed accordingly, or when rocks are cut and trees felled in the area for purposes of material development. By linking weather and its systematic extension climate to human lake entanglements, herders relay that weather and climate change is not an independent domain that is subject exclusively to the laws of physics. Rather, they know that human actions or inactions is deeply entwined with fluctuations in weather and climate. For most herders, and I'm coming to a close here, climate change is experienced and explained in also a cosmological idiom. It signals the breakdown of human-lake relationality. The migration of water, whether through the drying up of a lake or its overflowing, is explained as a mermaid deliberately migrating away from human drip, which most herders evaluate has been accumulating in recent years in relation to new material desires, new buildings, and new development activities, which are all seen as new causes of drip. They also relate it to the declining local enthusiasm, especially among younger generations, for community rituals and festivals. So there are fewer opportunities for individual and collective drip reduction. Water migrating is experienced by herders as indicative of the changing interactive attitude between humans and mermaids. It is in this sense that climate change also manifests as a cultural, spiritual, and ritual problem. And I will end on that note. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Professor Guptas, for that very well structured and detailed talk. I think the keynote kind of sets the tone of the conference in some sense, because he very beautifully brought his argument to 4 propositions, and he ended with his own field notes, extensively having worked in Bhutan. But I think what I want to dwell on a little further would be the 4th proposal that he mentioned, where he said that looking at a disaster through very limited lens of science and technology is something that we are increasingly feeling the limitations of. And there is an increased need to move beyond that, to open up this space to social sciences, to humanities, to create some sort of a dialogue that brings in these local voices, the indigenous voices, and creates some sort of a link with the global dialogues that are happening. If you're really, and I think he mentioned this very well. This is again kind of stretching from the inaugural address too by the president of the governing body, where he mentioned that we from this region, we inhabit, it's a very unique ecosystem where everything is interconnected. And in that sense, I think human action and inaction, along with the multi-species engagements, become very important. But in this, if we really have to go on the local and the indigenous voices, that I think is the need of the hour, because otherwise the policies that are being made without understanding the specificities of the region, which is very, very essential. Thank you so much, Professor, because I feel like your field notes added a lot of rich subtext to what you are suggesting or you're proposing. I'll now open the floor for questions. If there are any questions for Professor Butas, we have around, I think, 5 to 6 minutes. So I request all of you to keep your questions brief and ask if you have.
Thank you very much, Professor Uters, for your wonderful presentation, and also, talking about our advancing the environmental humanities lens to understand or to study disasters. So my question is that using the frame of the non-humans is one of the very important ways in environmental humanities research. But it was very interesting or provoking to hear that humans are also ecological and geological. So I think, I remember also the debate in political ecology, where scholars said that there is a little bit of backseat of ecology in political ecology. So maybe humans also are taking a backseat a little bit in a more than human research. I know there is a dilemma when I am placing this, but this was very fascinating when you say it again. Humans are simultaneously ecological and geological. So if you can elaborate on that. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's a great remark, actually. For a long time in anthropology and allied disciplines, we have been arguing that what set humans apart is that humans have culture. We are cultural beings. Now, in the process of making that argument, we have ended up separating and perhaps even lifting above humans from the environment that sustain them. We have fostered knowledge of humans as separate, detached, and above the environment. So when I argue that we humans are not only cultural beings, but also ecological and geological beings, what I'm trying to suggest is that we should reground our scholarship and our knowledge of humans as part of a network that includes the land, that includes plants, that includes animals, it includes all beings, right? With humans being a node in this network rather than being detached and elevated from it. And the recognition or the affirmation of humans as not only cultural beings, but also geological and ecological beings is a small step in the direction of focusing on humans as closely entwined with other beings.
Thank you so much. There's another question for you.
I think you can watch me.
You can't watch you.
Just a quick one. Yeah, we are running behind the schedule. I'm Dhupguri here. It's really fascinating. I don't have to repeat it. Just towards the end of your presentation, you mentioned about this entanglement of how spiritual, religious, sentiments are, entangled in describing or interpreting natural events or disasters. I'm talking about India. I'm speaking from India. I mean, these entanglements are very much evident, all over India, in fact. But what has happened in the recent time, like this entanglement or intersection, it has been kind of channeled in a particular political way that you are not saying revoking various primordial connection for political interest, right? So this entanglement has actually gone for a very different direction. It's no longer being treated as something very essential, but as something very political. So I'm just a little apprehensive whether this entanglement has been appropriated by political interest for their vested, political purposes. And if it is so, the whole idea of resistance, to such kind of disaster or man-made or corporate disasters, how can we really, think of that? Right. So this is just my precise point. You can elaborate.
Thank you. The voice was not very clear, so I hope I understood it correctly. To me, to focus on entanglement is always political because it affirms a decolonial stand, right? It argues, and decolonial in the sense of a human in its colonial attitude to animals and plants, right? It's entanglement is decolonial because it's humbling. It makes humans realize that they are no longer above and apart from other beings, right? But they share the same network, right? Secondly, it's also an ethical position by trying to empower or give voice or meaningfully include in the discussion the interest, the life of other than humans, right? And there is now an emerging body of theory that talks about what we call multi-species justice and multi-species ethics. And these are ways of seeing, thinking, and acting that argues that for justice to be truly just, it must also be just for other than humans. It must free itself from human-only perspectives. So for me, in short, entanglement is always political because it is a revisioning of memberships in society in a way, right? Opening up society to other than humans, number one. And it's an ethical position in the sense that it is a humbling position to write and think from.
Absolutely. I mean, no dispute on that. But when the Kedarnath, incident happened in India, in this decolonial system, the way you are putting it, it was utilized, appropriated for.
Sorry, I'm not able to hear you.
Yeah, can you hear me?
This is
yeah.
better.
So when
yes.
We had a flood in Uttaranchal, in the Kedarnath flood incident. So this decolonial episteme that you were mentioning, it was appropriated for various political ends. So that is where my apprehension comes up. I absolutely agree with you that it is desettling this human centricity, but then this desettling process is also tied up with various, subterranean political proclivities at the same time, right? So I mean, we have to somewhere, walk this very, I would say, tightrope, how to sort of decolonize and at the same time not ending up, becoming, prawn in somebody's political hands. So that's what I'm just, talking about. Otherwise, absolutely, your point is very much taken.
Yeah. Well, all knowledge is potentially political, and as scholars, it's our duty to be as accurate and as close to what our respondents tell us, right?
Right. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Any more questions? We are already running a little behind schedule, so I think we will be wrapping up this session. Thank you so much, Professor Wouters, for that wonderful keynote address. And I think it's even more, it's validating in a sense, because this is what we are doing over here for this conference. There are people from different disciplines, from the sciences and from social sciences and humanities. And hopefully the 3 days of conferencing will break new grounds and give us new ideas. Thank you so much. So with that, I bring an end to the first keynote session of this conference. Over to you, Dhupguri.
Thank you, Professor Wouters, once again for kindly accepting our invitation. And wish we could have you here, but this was a fascinating keynote kickstart our conversation. Thank you once more. So with that, we come to the end of the first keynote session. And as we are running a little behind time, so I would now request our Honorable Principal Sir, Dr. Mahavidyalaya, along with our Honorable dignitaries over here, Professor Mahavidyalaya and Professor Jalpaiguri, to formally inaugurate our book of abstracts for this conference. And I also request my colleague, Dhupguri, to assist Sir and Ma'am and Polymer Sir also. And also our President Sir is over here. So kindly Sir, activate to Ashwin. And everyone here, can you please join us also?
WhatsApp link
Yeah, they are there.
We are extremely happy, you know, over 100 papers are there from the
WhatsApp is happy, Malda is happy.
We're extremely happy. We just so thank you all.
This book of abstract was beautifully compiled by LearnWay. You can see the kind of perfection with which we have worked hard in the last 1 or 2 days to bring this to a complete completion. Now I will without further ado, next moderator of the session from the to welcome Professor Mahavidyalaya, who is waiting here, and all of us are eagerly waiting for Sir's keynote section. Especially, I would request the students as well, students who are outside the conference room, please guide us. And everyone should also assemble so that we can
বুঝতে পেরেছি আমি লিংকটা খুলতে যাচ্ছি একদম মনে আছে লিংকটা ডায়া তো ওয়েবসাইটটা ডায়া একবার ঢুকে যাবে
for all the participants, a small note is that except for few people who have earlier informed us about the certificates to be given just after their presentation, we would be able to distribute the certificate towards the end of the day. Thank you. Thank you for your patience.
So we will come over and have the team with it. Yeah. So I guess you don't have to. Yeah. Online technical session shall start as per the schedule. Whereas the offline session you might have just 15 minutes here. So just to introduce what you want to do, I need to introduce. I think many of you are already aware of. So I hope that it has read out. I have a CV over here. And I just want to read it out. Just to give you a sense, it is a kind of a symbol of pride for us, especially for us who are working in different institutions, undergraduate institutions in this part of Bengal. So you always take out the fact that we are posted in universities or campuses. Here's the person who has done really his posting into such marvelous wonders. And I'm only one such marvelous wonder with me, the book that is there in your syllabus, no path is straight. Apart from this book, you know how he is a person who stands on the linearity between so many spaces, the spaces between history and, let's say, memory, spaces between literary and the non-literary, spaces between human and the non-human, and so many other music and poetry. So as you read this book, you can understand, how, he is enchanting us, his experience there is learning language, history, memory, factor, and so many insights, right? So that's the hallmark of the book. And this is present also in the field notes book, which has got an award. It's a fact that he was invited in Delhi, Guardian, and because also he has been his books are now read in various syllabuses. From North-Bengal University as well. He has written in Bengali extensively, which is also very interesting. If you read this particular book, you realize that kind of command he has in the language, English, as well as when you read the Bengali, you will be wondering the kind of again the same kind of creative command that we have in the Bengali language. So in many measures, I again want to say that here is a really a true criminal figure. I was mentioning this to Devanati yesterday, the Nobel laureate, immediately I remember in her works also, she has very interestingly done this fiction, combined fiction with journalistic activities. So this is also very much present in Polygon. I can really count him, as a kind of figure who has transcended the limits of literature. So in that note, now I request Polygon sir, please come over and deliver your speech. We're all working for you. And we have one memento, principal sir. Okay. So yeah. So this is a small memento, a small, you can say, a token of regards to her. So sir, yeah. Thank you. I'm really excited.
What I can do don't need those the last room.
যেটা বানিয়ে এনেছো স্যারের জন্য এখানে দেখিয়ে দিই হোয়াটসঅ্যাপে দিয়ে দাও হ্যাঁ
Good afternoon, everyone.